I know that the snow and Las Vegas don't really have much in common, so this might feel like an odd way to start a Las Vegas vlog, but I'm kind of a sucker for good drone flight and B-roll opportunities, so you guys are just gonna have to settle. Plus, it's my vlog, so I get to do whatever I want. Anyway, this is Yucaipa, Southern California, and man, it is a winter wonderland out here after just like 2 days of rain. How crazy is it, honestly, to live in California? You have like the beach and this, maybe an hour apart. Pretty wild. Anyway, about today though, I'm gonna be playing at either the Aria or the Wynn, still undecided. And I'm also not sure which stakes, either 2-5 or 5-10. Something you guys might find interesting though is that the next vlog will very likely be a 10-20 no limit game from the Bellagio. Now that'll be a first for myself as well as the channel, so I figured that would make some pretty interesting content. I don't want to make any promises though, because there are a few things that have to be worked out in order for that to happen. But that'll be next vlog. So if you guys are interested, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, or whatever I'm supposed to say. About today though, it's either the Wynn or the Aria, both of which are very popular poker locations, and I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with. And if you're not, I got you. Now I'm gonna get on the road because it's about a 3.5 hour drive from here. But luckily with the power of YouTube, for you guys, it'll be like 2 seconds. Let's go. All right, so finally in Vegas here, and when I first pulled up to the Encore, they told me the poker room actually got moved over to the Wynn. So this is what it looks like now. As you guys can see, it's out on the casino floor, which is different than the poker room that was in the Encore. To be honest, I kind of prefer it this way. It's a much more laid back, chill vibe. I know some of you guys would kill me for saying that since the Encore poker room was so great, but just my honest opinion. Anyway, I was going to play some 5-10 no limit, but that game looked completely miserable, so instead I opted for the 2-5 no limit, which looked a lot more fun, and it didn't take long at all to get involved when I looked down at 7-6 of clubs, my first hand dealt. I open it up to $20, and the player on my left calls. We go heads up to a flop of King 9-8 with 2 clubs. Right off the bat, we smash the flop, and to be honest, I'm a little out of sorts, still haven't even unracked my chips or anything, so while I would almost always advocate to just bet, for some reason I decided to check it. I guess maybe I was gonna check raise or something silly like that. Anyway, my opponent checked it back. No problems, because the turn comes a queen of clubs. Now I'm kind of kicking myself for not betting the flop, obviously, but gonna proceed with the value betting plan here, so I put in a bet of $25 and my opponent makes the call. River comes off the queen of hearts. I decide to bet $100, which is the size of the pot. My opponent thinks it over for a little bit, but eventually makes the call. So since we're not getting raised, seems very likely that we are good, and indeed that's the case. So we pick up the first pot we play, and we're off to a good start. In the second hand, the straddle is on, and we see a limp from under the gun. I raise it up to $60 out of the big blind with ace-jack of clubs, and both the straddler and the limper make the call. So we're going to go 3 ways here to a flop of King 5-3 with 1 club. Now, being that this is 3 ways, I think it's certainly fine to check it, since bluffing into 2 opponents is probably not too great, but seeing as this board is so good for me and there's a lot of turn cards which are going to help us, I decided to put in a small bet and at least try to get a heads up going to the turn, which is actually what ends up happening when the straddler folds but the under the gun player makes the call. Turn card's the 6 of spades, which is obviously much better for him than for me, but at the same time I feel like he could be floating with a lot of weak holdings on the flop since we see bet so small. And now on this turn card, if I bet pretty large, he's going to have to fold a lot of those, like say for example a 5, or maybe like pocket 7s or 8s, or I don't know, I'm trying to figure out hands that limp call, and seems like those would be in there, right? So anyway, I decided to just put in a big bet here, pretty much give up if I get called. I put in a $275 bet, and my opponent does indeed make the call, so I'm pretty much done with it. River comes with 3 hearts, I check it over to him, and a little bit odd I thought was that he put in a bet of $500. Anyway, I don't think too much about it and just let it go. In the next one, the straddle is on once again. The player on my right opens in the cutoff to $35, and I look down at pocket tens on the button. I raise it up to 105. The small blind now calls, which is a little bit odd, and the cutoff calls as well. So 3 ways here to a flop, which we might have to tread a little bit carefully on since the small blind calling the 105 is slightly alarming, but no need to panic whatsoever because the flop comes down ace 10-3 with a couple of clubs. An amazing looking flop, as it seems pretty likely that at least one of our opponents will have an ace. So when the action checks to the cutoff, I'm thinking about how much I'll bet once she checks it over to me. But I realize I won't even get the chance because she announces all in for around $450. The only downside to this is that it's going to look so strong, whether I call or raise, that we probably won't get any more action from the small blind, no matter how we play the hand, but he probably has like pocket jacks anyway. I put in the call, and we're off to a run out. Turn card's a 6 of clubs, which is obviously not the card we really want to see. Doesn't really matter that the flush came in though, because we're up against ace 10. Talk about running good, huh? Flopping middle set against top 2. Man, it's almost embarrassing. In the 4th hand of the night, the straddle is on once again, which I'm not complaining about at all. As you guys know, I love the straddle. There's 2 limpers, and the button makes it $70. I'm in the big blind with pocket 3s. I had around 2,000 or maybe 2,500 in my stack, and the button had, I think, about the same, maybe a little bit less. So with so much money left to play for, seems to me like set mining is more than profitable. So I put in the call, and both of the limpers call as well. So we're going to go 4 ways here, just looking for a miraculous 3, which of course comes right on the flop. King Jack 3 with a couple of hearts. Oh boy, seems like it's going to be a big one. I check it, both of the limpers check it. I have my fingers crossed that the button is going to put in a continuation bet. Unfortunately, he does not. He checks it back. So we're off to a turn card, which is the deuce of spades. And I know what you're thinking. It's time to build this pot, put some money in the middle. But what I'm thinking is both of the limpers checked it over to the button on the flop because he's the pre-flop raiser. So it seems like they could easily have something strong, but just naturally check it over to him. But once the flop checks around, they're going to bet their hand here on the turn. So I feel like the best way to build a big pot is actually to check it once again and try to go for a check raise. So that's what I do, and indeed the plan seems to work because the middle position player, who I think was the 2nd limper, puts in a bet. However, it's not too big, just $75. I'm happy to see that the button makes the call, and now the action's back on me. I raise it up to $275. The first player makes the call, but the button gets out of the way. So we're going to go heads up here to a river card, which is the King of Clubs. Given that I've shown so much strength, I decided to just bet since it didn't seem like he would put in a thin value bet or a bluff. And I didn't want a king to check back. So I elect for a size of $700. And I get absolutely owned when he thinks about it for like not even that long, shows me a king, and folds. Whew. Talk about just completely wrecking me. Let's just move on. Once again, the straddle's on in this next hand. We see a middle position raised to $35. The small blind makes the call, and I look down at Queen 9 of hearts in the straddle. Flop comes down ace 8-7 with a couple of hearts. Action checks to the original raiser, who puts in a c-bet of $60. The small blind makes the call, and with the queen high flush draw, I elect to just make the call. It's obviously not great to call out of position with queen high, but I don't really feel like check raising an ace high flop. So I just make the call, and we go to a turn card, which is the 10 of clubs. So now we pick up a straight draw. Action checks all the way around, which is nice. So we see a river card for free, which is one of the good ones, the 7 of hearts, giving us a flush but pairing the board. I feel like this river card is going to get checked back a lot by the pre-flop raiser, so time to put in our own value bet. However, it doesn't seem like we can really go too big since his most likely holding is an ace, and we also have the small blind behind who could easily have an ace herself. We don't want her to fold that, so I elect for a relatively small sizing of $125. The middle position player folds fairly quickly, but when it gets back to the small blind, she thinks about it for a bit before sliding in the call. When she calls that slowly, it seems like we're good, and indeed that's the case. Queen high flush takes it down. This next hand is against that same lady we just had a flush against. The straddle's on, there's a limper in early position, she limps in, and I look down at pocket kings on the button. I raise it up to $50. The original limper folds, but she makes the call. So we're going to go to a flop here, heads up, of ace 9-4 with a couple of hearts and a diamond. She checks it over to me, and naturally I check it back since there's one of the big cards out there, and our pair is smaller than that card. So we're off to a turn, which is the 5 of diamonds. She puts in a bet now for $35. I'm definitely not going to fold for just one bet, especially this small. So I make the call. We're off to a river card now, which is the 8 of clubs. Now she comes out and checks it, and I think it's definitely worth contemplating a value bet here. Seems unlikely she would play an ace this way. Her more likely holdings, given how the hand has played out, is probably a 9, or maybe she had some draw that pairs on the 8. A lot of one pair holdings that we're still beating. However, because the ace is out there, we can't really bet too large if we're trying to get called by a worse hand. So I decide to bet $55, probably expecting to get called by better hands once in a while, but when she makes the call, I show the kings and we win. So nice to get a little more value there on the end. Once again, the straddle is on for this hand. There's a late position limp. Small blind makes it $35, and I look down at 8-6 of diamonds in the big blind. I decide to make the call, and we see a call from the straddler and the late position limper as well. So 4 ways here to a flop of ace, 4, deuce, 2 spades, 1 diamond. Action checks all the way around, and now the turn card comes to 3 of diamonds, giving us a straight draw as well as a flush draw. When the action checks to me though, I'm not really interested in bluffing into 3 other opponents, so I just check it once again. When the action gets to the late position player, he puts in a bet of $60. For that price, I can't really go anywhere. Check raising seems like it's probably the best play, but this time I decide to just call. I think the way to compensate for only calling is to find a lot of bluffs on different river cards. And that's what happens. When the river comes to 7 of spades, I put in a $200 bet. It's going to be pretty hard to call here with a pair or even 2 pairs. And I don't expect him to have a flush since he checked it back in position on the flop. He doesn't think for too long and lets it go. So this one goes according to plan. At this point in the night, our table gets pretty wild, and we manage to get some double and triple straddles going. And eventually we managed to get the very rare quadruple straddle. In this hand, that's exactly what's going on. It's 2, 5, 10, 20, 40, 80. Did I say that right? I think so. Anyway, I'm in the 40, and the action folds all the way to me somehow, and I look down at Queen 6 offsuit. With all this dead money out there and only one player to get through, I can't help myself, so I raise it to $200, hoping my opponent on my left just has some garbage. And maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But whatever the case, he makes the call. So we're going to see a flop here, and we kind of get bailed out when it comes down Queen 5-5 with a couple of spades. I bet $130. He makes the call. Turn card's the 8 of diamonds. Seems like a pretty big brick unless he's got maybe a hand like pocket 8s, obviously. But I don't think there's much value in betting now, so I decided to check it over to him and exercise some pot control with a very mediocre top pair. My opponent doesn't agree with that whole checking thing though, because he comes out and bets $340. Nothing to do here but just make the call, so that's what I do. We're off to a river card in a pretty sizable pot, which is the deuce of diamonds. Seems pretty innocent to me, so the plan is to just check it over once again and probably call any reasonable sized bet. This is a little stressful because if he puts in a really big bet, it's going to be kind of dicey to call with a queen here, but eventually he decides against it and reluctantly checks it back. At this point, it seems very likely we're good, and indeed that's the case when I flip over the Queen 6. He mucks it, and we scoop this ridiculous quadruple straddled pot. In this next hand, we're back to normal with just a regular $10 straddle. There's a player in early position who limps in, and now the player on his left raises it up to $50. He could be doing this fairly wide, just trying to isolate the limper, so when I look down at ace-queen on the button, I'm going to put in the raise here. I make it $160. the limper folds and the razor calls. So heads up in position to a flop of Queen 10-3 rainbow. Probably one of the best flops we can ask for. So when he checks it to me, I'm just going to continue betting. No need to go too big though, since the board is fairly dry. So I put in a bet of $105 and my opponent makes the call. So we're off to a turn card here, which is the 3 of clubs. Very clean turn card, but when he checks it to me, I'm actually going to exercise a little bit of balance here because my opponent in this hand is a pretty strong player who is probably not going to call with worse for 3 streets. So I feel like the best play is to just check it back and either go for a really big bet on the river if he checks it to me, or I don't know, I guess evaluate depending on the card. So I do check it back, and we're off to a river card, which is the Queen of Clubs, giving us a fairly hidden full house. Now my opponent comes out and bets $500. I don't really think he should be doing this with pretty much any holding, but it doesn't really matter since we have a full house. So I'm definitely not going to complain. He's only got around maybe $700 left. So even though my hand is going to be completely face up if I go all in, there's really nothing else to do. So that's what I do, and he thinks about it for like 2 seconds before flicking in the call. At this point, it seems pretty apparent that he's also got a queen, and indeed that's the case. We chop it up with King, Queen of Hearts. So kind of unfortunate actually that we end up chopping it when we had him in such bad shape. If the turn card wasn't a 3, obviously we get the max there, but still better than losing, right? Alright, this last hand is probably the toughest of the entire night. Not like that's really saying much since I've been running pretty good the entire session, but anyway, there's a few limpers and the straddle is on once again. I look down at ace queen in the small blind and raise it up to $60. Now the big blind makes it $180. This is going to be pretty strong, I feel like, since I'm raising out of the small blind instead of just completing the $10. So when the action gets back to me, I feel like folding is actually completely fine, but seeing as we're like, I think 2,500 deep, it's probably a little too tight to just let it go. So I make the call and we're off to a flop of Queen 7-4 rainbow. Mixed feelings for sure, because if we're up against aces or kings, maybe even pocket queens, now we're destined to lose at least some money. And what can you do, you know? So I check it over to him. He puts in a continuation bet of $140. Definitely can't raise, can't fold. That only leaves one option. Now we're off to a turn card, which is 7 of clubs. I just check it. He puts in a bet of $425 now. And once again, nothing to do but just continue with a call. However, it is getting a little sketch. Seems very likely my opponent could have a hand like pocket kings. But, like I said, what can you do, you know? We're not just going to muck it, right? I mean, I guess you could, but maybe you guys are that good. I'm not. So we're off to a river card, which is the 3 of diamonds. Once again, I check it over to him. And to be honest, I'd be more than happy to just see him check it back. But that's not what he does. He goes for one final bet to the tune of $1,090. Okay, so now we're in a pretty nasty spot. Seems really unlikely that our hand is good now. After thinking it over for a bit, I decide to finally just let it go, giving my opponent credit for aces or kings. Now the only issue with my fold here is that we're really not going to have many better hands to call with, which is kind of disrespectful. It's almost like saying, hey man, I know you're never bluffing here, so I guess that's sort of what I'm saying when I mucked it though, but maybe it was wrong because he shows us the 9 of spades. More than likely now it seems that we just got owned. Unless he had a hand like 9-7 of spades, which is technically possible. To be completely honest, I probably just got wrecked. So, good hand, man. Anyway, a few minutes after that hand, I decided to rack up and head back to the hotel room. It was getting pretty late and I wanted to be well rested for 10:20 the next day. So, hope you guys enjoyed the hands. Well guys, another parking lot finale to a somewhat uneventful vlog. Up and down all day, and in the end I won like $500, which I guess is still pretty cool. You know, I'm not going to complain about $500. But anyway, enough about today. If you guys are interested, like I said, subscribe because that next session is going to be a 10-20 vlog from across the street over there at the Bellagio. But anyway, I'm exhausted, so I'm going to get back to the room, get some sleep, and hopefully run good tomorrow in that bigger game. All right, that's it for tonight, guys. As always, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for all the support. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Really appreciate that. Helps the channel continue to grow. All right, that's it. See you guys at the tables. Peace.